Hi, I'm Bob Greaves, and I have a show here at the place called The Unconventional Pastor, and I would love it if I could get your participation in the show with your questions and your comments by video. Your question or comment can be something about the Bible, theology, maybe something you saw on an earlier show, or something you read in my blog. Here's what I'd like you to do. Make a video in as high quality as you can of yourself asking the question or making the comment. After you've made your video, upload it to Facebook, YouTube, or someplace else where I can find it and make it public or private. Then you can send me a private message in Facebook that includes a link to your video. In your message, make sure that you include your full name spelled correctly. I'm kind of excited about sharing as many of your questions and comments as I can possibly fit in the show. On behalf of the New Covenant Group, I'd like to thank you for your participation in making this show even better. Good evening. This is Bob Greaves, and they call me the Unconventional Pastor. It's good to be back here again with you this Sunday evening. And as many of you who've been watching this for a while know, that on Sunday evenings, I really enjoy being able to bring on various different guests. And then on Wednesday, I'm here again at the same time, usually teaching on some sort of a topic. This last Wednesday, when I was here, I spoke about the nature of sin, and are we sinners by nature? And I got a lot of comments and a lot of questions about both that and the concept of what I was talking about, of the mystery of the indwelling Christ. And so I'm going, and they're actually in many ways very related questions. So I'm going to continue that this coming Wednesday. So if there are any questions that you have concerning this issue or this teaching that we are sinners by nature, or the concept of Christ living within the believer, make sure you get those questions to me so we can address them on Wednesday night. And I look forward to that. Now tonight, a friend of mine is waiting here in the wings to come on out, and so I'd like to introduce you to my friend Dave Lilligren. So Dave, why don't you say hello?
Hey Bob, how you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. I've not been feeling well, but this is so much fun to do. I can almost forget that I've been ill this weekend. Anyhow, so it's good to have you here, and you and I have been chit-chatting with each other in various ways for the last 3 years here, and you live out there in was it Missouri?
No,
Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I knew it was one of those M states. I know that you've got some nice wood stoves out there, because right?
Yes, and we may have to start using that tomorrow as I check the forecast, believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's about 80 today, but tomorrow it's going to change.
Yeah, and I remember talking about that when I was having some problems with the heat here at this house, and we fixed a lot of those problems by having to do some things. Anyhow, Dave, you've certainly been a person who came to be a person of faith a while back. Why don't you tell us a little bit about when you first became a person who had faith in Christ? Tell us a little bit about that.
It was a while back, but I wasn't young. I was probably 26. I had grown up in a family that didn't go to church. Parents didn't go to the same church, so we didn't go. And I don't know if you remember the late 60s, early 70s, but there was a lot going on in the culture, and a lot of us of that generation got caught up in a lot of things like drugs and whatnot. And so I tried to go to college right after high school, and I was majoring in foosball, billiards, and pinball, and so that wasn't working out. So I enlisted in the Navy. I spent 7 years in the Navy, and about 3.5 years I was forward deployed in the Far East, and just a wild, wild time. And when I came back to the States, I was almost 23. I just felt like I had lived my life, and just was just a hedonist. If you were to use one word to describe me, I was a hedonist. Well, I spent my last 3 years in the Navy in San Diego, and the last year there, I met a young lady whose cousin was stationed with me, and she was from the Philippines, and I happened to have lived there for a couple of years. So we dated, and then she moved to Chicago, and I got out of the Navy late '81, and I was driving home to Minnesota with a detour to see her in Chicago, and I knew she was a Christian. I wasn't, but I began to think about it at least, and had pretty much, I was an agnostic at that point, but was starting to come to understand that maybe there is a God. And anyway, so she took me to this church when I visited her, and I got a sense that people around me knew this Jesus and I didn't know him, and something inside of me wanted to know him. And so through a conversation there, I did come to know him, and it was just so radical, the change in my thinking. I had a lot of, from a drug abuse, I had a very cloudy mind that was instantly cleared. I had a new perspective on things, and I just couldn't believe the transformation that occurred. I didn't know what was going on, and left Chicago, was on my own, and started to have a relationship with the living God, and I didn't really have anybody to describe it to me. It was just happening.
Hmm,
Um, Right,
it's
and
beautiful.
so then my girlfriend, who is my wife now, 30 years, we've been married. She came and we got married in '82, and I really had this craving to study the Bible, so enrolled rather in the Moody Bible Institute of Chicago. So we moved back to Chicago. She was 8 months pregnant. We had a kid born first semester and a son born first semester, a daughter born the fourth semester there, and God provided. It was amazing. I had
Hmm.
no job when we moved out there. She was 8 months pregnant, and it was just an exciting, exciting time.
Now, some of our viewers might not know it, but Moody Bible Institute is actually the oldest Bible institute in the United States of America, isn't it?
It's, well, 1886. Anybody can beat that. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty old.
I think the second oldest one is actually here in my neighborhood that used to be Practical Bible Training School. Yeah. But yeah,
What's it what's it called now?
they became a college and they're now called Davis College.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So yeah, so I graduated, and we were living in the inner city of Chicago, and we were part of a church. And I eventually, after graduation, came on staff, became a pastor. Well, we were in that church 12 years. I was a pastor about 8 of those 12. A lot of exciting times. We had a homeless shelter for about 3 years, a very ethnically diverse congregation. My children were ethnic minorities where we lived and where we, worshiped and worked. So it was a very exciting time in our lives at that time.
No, there's a huge rescue mission there too. Were you ever a part?
Our mission, yes. I about once a month I would preach down there. It was that I could go on some tangents right now about that place, but yeah, that's right down there. They had the radio show Unshackled.
Right.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
they did a tremendous amount of humanitarian work there, which was unusual, particularly for the evangelicals at that time, because I mean, people go there, they take care of them, they clothe them, they take care of their medical needs, dental needs. Amazing
Correct. It
outreach.
is. They do a lot. They do a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, so here you are there for 12 years, 8 years as a pastor, and then you moved on. What was it that led to that moving on? Just time to do something else, or what?
Oh no, a lot of factors were going on. One, there was a desire to come back to Minnesota, but we were in the inner city, and we were almost like missionaries in a sense. And it's like, do we abandon this mission field? And we just felt that the Lord was making it unmistakably clear that He wanted us back in Minnesota. At the same time, for the last year or two in the pastorate, there was this unrest inside of me, this concern I had from as I would read the New Testament, I would see this disconnect between what I was seeing going on in terms of the church and what I was seeing going around me and around other churches at the time. And I just realized that I don't think what I was doing is what Jesus had in mind when he started his church.
And so that eventually led to your looking back to go back home. Now, of course, big difference between this city of Chicago. I mean, for people who've never been there, you think New York City, kind of. It's a city. It's a big place. Lots of people. Not entirely safe. And
Yeah,
then, but you,
yeah, one of the coolest facts about Chicago is you can eat at a different restaurant for every meal and never eat at the same restaurant twice for your whole lifetime. I mean, that's
yeah.
huge. I
Now,
tend to, view things in form with food as a reference point sometimes.
yeah.
So,
With now,
I
of
mean, you
course,
can tell, but
tell people what home was like, because it's a little different than the city. What was home like?
well, okay, well, I kind of grew up in the country, and then when we first came back to Minnesota, we lived in a suburb, which, I mean, I'd rather live in the inner city than a suburb any day because suburbs are really boring. But I just had this yearning inside of me ever since I was a kid, and when I went in the Navy, I always wanted to be back on a farm. And so we were able to purchase a 60-acre farm up halfway between Minneapolis and Duluth. It's carved out of the North Woods. We have beef cattle. We often raise our own pork, our own chicken, and kind of a self-reliant situation, which is kind of cool for us.
Awesome. Yeah. Very different from the city. I can't imagine. Very different. I mean, just a whole different set of chores, totally different environment. I have never I visited farms. I never lived on a farm, but I've visited them. Even had the pleasure of riding the horses to go out and bring the cattle in, and on trained horses that I don't know, just riding them. And they brought they brought the cattle in all by themselves. When I was about 12, I did that. Anyhow, so here you are back in Minnesota, and with this growing sense of dissonance. What did you do then in terms of ministry?
Well, when we first came back, I was supposed to take over a church south of the Twin Cities and just felt that wasn't right. And so we planted a new church in the North Metro, which started out as a cell church, but it was started out in our home. And we ended up becoming a house church. And we house church for 7 years, about half of that time down in the Twin Cities, and the other half up here by the farm. There were other families that had moved up here. There were other people we knew. But around about 7 years into this, I realized, and here's a mistake I was making, is I thought that if we could replicate the environment of the first century, that somehow God would minister and relationships would happen. It's just that we had been doing it wrong, I thought was the problem. It was more of a form structure issue. And then I started
Mm-hmm.
reading some stuff, but one of the things at that time I was reading Watchman Nee, The Normal Church, and I had known this for a long time, but in the New Testament, you never see a distinction between congregations based on anything but geography. The Church of
Yeah.
Galatia, the Church of Corinth. And I realized all around me the distinction was not geographical, but doctrinal. And so I
Mm-hmm.
came to understand there's only one local assembly. It just happened to meet in all these different buildings. So we began to just visibly identify with these people and visited churches and so to make a long story short, we ended up in a church, and eventually I ended up preaching again
Uh-huh. Yeah. Now,
in a small
I think that there's something here that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something that I think is true about the nature of dissonance and the experience of it is that it's not as if dissonance occurs all at once and with clarity. So there's a sense here in which you've already been in Chicago and you've experienced the fact that things just don't seem to be the way that they were in New Testament times. Well, anyway, you're experiencing this difference that between what you thought Jesus would have done or Jesus would have asked you to do
right.
and what was going on. But then now you get to back there, and now you're looking to another formula, whereas the dissonance was, I would wonder if it was actually created by you when you mentioned about how you first came to faith in God. It was just real.
Hmm.
It was it,
Hmm.
and so there's a sense in which I would wonder if in this pursuit of form is some of this dissonance not yet worked out. I'm wondering if that's what you're talking about.
Well,
Uh,
right, exactly, because what was going on is my walk with God, which at one point before I went to Bible school, it was real. I didn't know the Bible; I just knew Him, and
mhm,
and so it seems like the more I knew the Bible, and I learned it quite well. I actually graduated top of my class. I don't say that to brag, but just to illustrate that I knew the Scriptures. I was quite biblically literate, and yet the more it seemed I did ministry, and the more I studied, the further away He felt. And I
mm,
believe what happened is that I had exchanged a relationship with a person for a relationship with information about that
mm,
person, and then instead of being in relationship with that person, I relied on my performance to get his favor rather than just knowing I was already loved and already accepted. But again, Bob, I mean, but by this point, I'm still kind of not getting it yet, in my
right.
journey.
Yeah.
When,
Hey, I was no different. It took me quite a while to turn
yeah,
this corner. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
anyhow, you're in this home church then, and then you ended up getting back to this, visiting all these churches as you've seen the community more as your church, and then you end up back in this one church in the pulpit again.
yes, and only I'm coming in with a new set of eyes because I've been out of it for 7 years, and I really I would define things differently than some of the people. I defined a church as a place where Jesus was, the reality of his presence, the fact that he was your pastor. Some people had a hard time with that. And
Uh,
so I lasted a couple years, and I just felt it was wise for us to leave because we were creating some issues, because there were people that were like understanding what I was saying, and then there were people who didn't. And the people who didn't, unfortunately, were the people in leadership. So
right.
I left, and I wasn't going to go back to any more churches, but we had a friend that invited to another church in a small town, and ended up preaching there for 3 years.
Wow. Yeah. Well, in a sense, I think it's interesting what you point out that it was the people in leadership that didn't seem to like the free thinking Dave, and
Well, they
I
felt
think I've
threatened, yeah.
and I think I've had a similar experience. Now, it gives me, I'll tell you, mixed feelings because I really think that there is a great benefit in having, you know, organized efforts and people who possess skills of leadership. But I sometimes grieve over the fact that I feel as though our Christian faith is many times involved with people who in leadership um, lose sight of how the skill of leadership works in terms of a church, and I suppose that I really like your definition. I tell people that my local church is everybody who lives in my proximity and knows Jesus, no matter how they think, what they're doing, and that's
Right.
my local church. That's where my loyalty goes. And places where I gather, we're just people who can get along with each other well enough to get some things done, what have you. Anyhow, so does this dissonance build, or does it come to for you a real peak at about
Well,
this time?
it was at this time it was still building, but the last place I preached at did tend to have a good grasp of the concept of grace. They But my concern was that, and I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but I've kind of come to the conclusion that when I have a relationship with another person, essentially what I'm doing is I'm having a relationship with my mental image of that person. And
Hmm.
so in the context of meeting people on Sunday, that image is not very accurate, and you can't really have an authentic relationship unless the image is somewhat accurate, I think. And so I
Hmm.
told people, I said, your mental image of me on Sunday preaching here is not who I am. I mean, we gotta get to know each other. So I actually quit preaching just to get to know them, and that lasted about another 4 months, and then I was gone, and that was
Mm.
3 years ago. So
Yeah. So, where does that leave you now in terms of, well, first, in terms of how you interact with other Christians? And then I have another question for you about that too.
well, it's it's kind of been a lonely path the last 3 years. I keep losing friends, and I mean I shower daily, so I don't know what the problem is there. But it's just, I mean, I remember there was a young lady that I used to teach. We used to have a Bible school in our church in Chicago, and she was one of my students. And she unfriended me on Facebook because she did not want my heresies to appear on her wall. And all I did was question whether we can actually trust what God is doing in our hearts, you know. And she said, well, you trust in yourself. I trust in the scriptures. Well, actually, she was trusting in her understanding of the scriptures, which is the
Hmm.
same place I was. I was trusting in my understanding of the heart that God had written his law upon and poured his spirit into and poured his love into. So, yeah, I learned, I've learned, I think, to just avoid those conversations
Uh-huh.
now,
Yeah.
you know.
I, it's kind of sad and unfortunate. I'm glad that we know each other and that we get to interact with each other. To me, yeah, I've had a very similar experience having, been involved in ministry and finding that organized environment, in spite of many of its useful structures, just just was hostile sometimes to a more personal, more relational um, faith that was not necessarily in just the text or the teachings. I
Right.
totally identify with it. But I'm so glad that we have places like this, and uh, in a sense, I'm very sure that we have a number of viewers who are in exactly that same kind of place, or who are finding themselves arriving at that kind of place, and don't know really what to do with it. Now, the other question I had about that is that so you come to this place where, in a sense, you're kind of free floating, maybe a little bit lonely, wondering, how to go about this. And of course, you do interact. I know you still have a number of friends who haven't unfriended you, and that you do chit chat with. You've been talking with me for 3 years. Um, what did this do in the continued evolution, though, of your thinking?
Yes, there's a lot going on, but I just wanted to make a couple points. When we first
Sure.
left the church in 1995, we didn't have Facebook. The internet was just
Right.
coming
Right.
out. There was house church talk and some other house church thing, but we didn't have this resources that we have now. And now I have podcasts and I'm listening to people talk and I'm like, geez, I'm not the only one going through this. It's really massive actually. The people I'm running into on the internet that are experiencing these changes in their thinking. So, but I just want to make a huge point, and that is that I'm so thankful that my wife is on the same page with me
Uh
on
huh.
all this.
Hmm.
In fact, I think she was ahead of me on some of this. Seriously. And I mean, even when I was a pastor in the back, she said, "Honey, I wanted you to leave back then." Well, she couldn't tell me that. It's just. But no, I'm just thankful she's on the same page because it would be real rough if she wasn't.
I think that if I were to ask all of the ministers or people who've been in ministry who are in the audience to raise their hand if they felt that their wives were kind of there before they were, we we might have a number of
Yeah,
hands up.
yeah.
And I'm laughing as you say that because I I think that I was reluctant to give up the dream. Excuse me. I think I was more reluctant to give up that dream before my wife was. I'm going to
Sure.
just temporarily shut my mic off and cough. Hold on.
Go ahead. Uh, that's Bob Graves coughing, people.
Yeah,
Just
there we go. I'm glad I have a
so
mute button
you
over
have
here.
an E in your last name.
Yeah, yeah, it's British. Graves, like is in Great Britain.
Sure.
Grea is the way they pronounce it there, and from Great Britain originally, I guess the family was, and then they moved to Barbados and raised a lot of cane there, I guess,
Sure.
and other and other
Cane.
crops, and then moved to New York,
Sure.
and that's how I got here. But
So it is pronounced Graves, though.
yes, it is. Yeah,
If somebody
and
says it's Greaves, they don't know you.
yeah, yeah, and well, at least not that way.
Well, it's just we always have to have litmus tests, right, Bob? So that's just one of
Exactly. Yeah, that helps.
them. So anyway, as far as my thinking, then now, so I'm no longer preaching. So I no longer have to toe any doctrinal lines. And I think a real important word that was going on in my life at this point was honesty. See, this dissonance, I couldn't deal with it because I couldn't be honest. Couldn't
Oh,
be honest with
yeah.
what I believe because I might get rejected. And so I began, to realize my image of God was kind of messed up. You know, I had been a Reformed Baptist at one point. I clinged to 5 Point Calvinism for probably at least 20 years. And so my image of God was that he was kind of mad at me. And I better be careful, you know. I better make sure I give my tithe and offering or he'll get it from me some other way, like my refrigerator breaking down or my car breaking down, you know. Just really whacked out thinking like that I had.
Yeah. Well, how's your refrigerator now?
Uh, you know, I live on a farm, so we have redundancy.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a whole
yeah.
other topic. But anyway, but my whole thinking of God and one of the things that's hard in a lot of us, coming to know God as Father, we try to look at our earthly fathers, and that wasn't working for me, and I don't want to go into that right now. But it's when I remember seeing the words Jesus said, "You who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children. How much more your Father in heaven will give to his children," or something along them lines. And I'm like, then I started looking at my heart towards my son and my daughter, and I began to get a glimpse into God's heart towards me. I mean, there's nothing my
Mm,
kids can ever do to make me not love them, and that's just a microcosm of God's love for me. And so that was huge, being accepted no matter what I did. And I mean, I could have 20 years ago preached a sermon on that, but it wasn't a reality until just a few years ago. Freedom.
I'd be curious. Have your children seen that shift in you, and what impact has that had on them?
Yeah, it is. It's pretty powerful. Yeah, my sons, we're pretty close now, and yeah, we're best friends, and I'm happy. But before,
Aw-
when I was living under the law, we didn't, and I have a long ways to go. I mean, we're not like, I haven't shared a lot of my heart, but when I was going through some of these struggles, I shared them with him openly. And the
Yeah.
nice thing is, he shared some of his. He had a crisis of faith a few years ago. We talked about, and it was really that was good.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. I feel in many ways that changed um, when we've left the relationship with the text and relationship with the doctrine. We can relate to the people that we care about even more honestly than like you were looking
I
for
think so.
honesty.
I think so.
Yeah.
And our daughter lives far away, but we talk to her a lot, and yeah, they've seen the change. They've seen the
Awesome.
change.
Awesome. Now you're still a young man of what, 25, 30? No.
Roughly 25. Yeah. Actually, I'll be 57 in November.
Very good. Yeah.
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 I know I
Well,
don't look it, but I just, in the interest of full disclosure, I
right.
had to tell.
By the way, you're no longer working as a pastor. You do have
No.
you do have a job, I take it, right?
Yeah, I'm a geek. I work in networking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, we're the plumbers of the internet. We don't move water and sewage. We move data. So
Yeah.
we
Right.
make it
Yeah.
happen. So, and a lot of the work I can do from the farm over the internet, log into customers' networks and fix things and troubleshoot. So, yeah, I can work from home a lot, so it's cool.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Now,
Yep.
do you find that you miss at least the the pastoral? I was going to say the word position, but that's not what I mean. But the access or the availability of having been a pastor. Do you find you miss that, or is that a
No, I don't actually.
mhm,
To be honest, I mean, yesterday we were at some friends. They have a vineyard actually about 30 miles from here, and we picked grapes, my wife and I, and then we had a wine tasting, and they had a dinner for everybody at work, and they knew I had been a pastor, and so they asked me to say grace before the meal, and I was like, I felt really uncomfortable, but I did it. Guess having a couple glasses of wine helped too, but I did it, but I don't like to be identified because it's just not where my head is at, because I don't think the Father makes any distinction, amongst his children like that.
yeah? So it's in some
That's my
ways it's
opinion.
just I think I came myself to see the pastoral role, or whatever it is, as more of a relationship that since I've left the ministry, I think that there are many more occasions where I'm talking to somebody or working with somebody, and it's kind of like a temporary thing where I'm helping them through something, and in a sense I'm an anchor point for them, but I see it as more of a temporary thing, and then they move along fine on their own. But I got to say that for myself, I feel so much more like that is what I wanted the role of pastor to be. I didn't want to be the authority figure in somebody's life. I didn't want to be the leader in somebody's life. I didn't want to have to be the one who has to get everybody organized and let's make sure we're all on the program and stuff like that. I found that that's a part that I just couldn't identify with.
Well, because for
Yeah.
me, I mean, it's denying the reality of Christ. I mean, can't Jesus lead his sheep? So what I miss, okay, I do miss something. I miss talking, and I miss,
Hmm.
I don't miss the studying, but I do miss the teaching. So now I find myself, sometimes I'll be hanging out with some people, and we'll just talk for hours. And I,
Hmm.
it's like, when I would preach about grace or God's love or whatever, 100 people in a room, maybe 10 people understood what I was saying. Ever.
No.
And
Uh,
it was only affirming in them I was only helping them to see what they already believed, I guess.
yeah. What would you say are some of the ways that you would now say excuse me say things very differently than the way you used to? Can you give me a few
So
specifics? Your
for coughing.
microphone kind of your microphone cut out on me, Joey. Can
Oh,
you hear?
I want to encourage our audience to hang in with
we
us.
were having some
In
issues.
fact, I'll tell you what. Let's take a
Yeah.
quick break. Ready with the curtain, and we're going to come right back. We're going to hang up violently on Dave, and then we're going to connect with him again and see if that helps.
Okay.
All right. So
Very good.
let's close the curtain and play some music.
Well, this is Bob, and I'm back, hopefully done with all that coughing. And of course, we still have Dave Lilligren with us. And so, Dave, welcome back. Hopefully, we got our glitches out of the way. Are you there, Dave?
I am present and accounted for.
Awesome. So anyway, we were talking a little bit about if you could mention perhaps even some specific things that changed in your thinking and how you would say them now and say them from 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, a huge one is I know that God does not change, but my understanding of him has definitely changed quite a bit. I mean, and I understand that when people go through this process that I've kind of been through, I really feel for like kids that have grown up in Christian homes where they almost have to detoxify from some of the legalism they grew up in, and they become atheists, and they almost have to just to detoxify from that image of God. Because, I mean, concerning the God that not that I first met, but maybe that I talked a lot about for a lot of years, I think I'm kind of an atheist concerning that God. I don't see God as the analogy I use is you go to somebody's house and the man you're at his house and he falls in love with this girl and wants her to be his bride, and he says, I'll take care of you forever, but ignore the fact that I'm torturing your parents in the basement. That's not the God that I know, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, yeah.
Okay.
And your mic was
my mic went out? Okay.
If you shut your video off for a moment, maybe we could hear you more clearly.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. And if you guys can grab a picture of Dave off of his Facebook page and kind of throw that up there every so often.
Audio.
Yeah.
I can take my video off.
Is it on now or?
Just took my better. Can you hear me, Bob?
Joey, I'm hearing you break up.
Still?
But
yep, I got my video off.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So one big
good one,
thing.
Okay.
One big thing that changed was your view of God's attitude toward you.
Correct. Towards me and towards people.
Yeah.
It's interesting how when you're really caught up in all this stuff that God tends to not like the same people you don't like, and God tends to not like the things that you don't like, and so no, I mean he's crazy in love with us. He's crazy in love with me, and I mean while I was still before I was even created, I mean he loved me. He cannot not love because he is love.
And now, when do you think that became so real to you that it just wouldn't work to try to keep this in, say, at least the institutions you were working in?
About the last year I was preaching, I started hearing questions like, well, what if we sin, or what about the law? And it's like they didn't get it. I mean, do you have to have a law to tell you to love your wife? Do you have to have a law to tell you not to steal? Well, why would I steal from somebody if I love them? If my wife has my heart, I have her heart. Why do I need a law to tell me to do anything? I mean, a law, Paul says, for the lawless. And I don't know. I mean, it's clear to me. I don't know about you, Bob, but.
And then you cut out, unfortunately.
Really?
Clear to you. Say it again.
No, I was just saying that, about love. I'd be preaching about love, and people start asking, what about the law? And what, does that mean we can sin? Well, they didn't get what I was trying to say. I mean, if you love somebody, you're not going to rob from them. You're not going to sleep with their wife. You're not going to harm them, right?
I don't see how that even works. Sometimes I tell people, you can do whatever you want to do as long as you're going to be honest about the impact it has on people that you really deeply care about.
Right. But think about, back, what we call the first sin, the fall. Remember, um, what Adam did when God approached him. He said, "Adam, where are you?" And he said he was ashamed, and he hid himself.
Mm-hmm.
So what had happened in what we call the fall is the relationship, and if you want to call it sin, it affected Adam. It never affected God. Now that was huge for me too. That my
Right.
sins never affected God. God was never mad at me. He was maybe mad at what sin did to me and what sin does to others, but it was all about relationship, and that's
Yeah.
what suffered between Adam and the Father. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And what fell was his confidence, his
That's
his
in the
sense of certainty.
relationship too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I would have a very similar attitude about all of that. And I'm going to take a slip of water here. Uh, yeah, I uh, I think that for myself even that recognizing how the sin, even the word sin, I think has taken on a cultural meaning.
A
The word originally
moral. It
comes
became a
from the
moral thing.
Yeah, right. And I don't think it was originally a moral thing. I
Right.
think that somebody asked me in an earlier conversation just the other day, well, what is sin and what need do we have to even talk about it? And I think that the way we tend to talk about it, we don't need to. But I said, well, think of it like this: um, ready, aim, fire. Oh, I missed. I wonder why. Just simply being honest about the fact that things don't work the way we had intended or expected, or we realize that we are not working the way that So there are some problems or some issues, but these are things that I would see personally more as issues of character, issues of integrity, issues of developing honesty and developing love, and that although I do think it makes a lot of sense to at least experiment with different ideas. One idea we could start with is this: stop missing marks, stop missing them, just stop doing it and start hitting them right. And that sounds good, but it doesn't work. Whereas we
Right.
find that the mark that we're supposed to be hitting isn't even really the formal performance, but if there are people that we love and they know that they are loved, if they know that they are treasured, it is amazing how much imperfect behavior they can accept and tolerate. Not that we want to do that, but as we're all growing and learning, these things just cease to be issues in that kind of a context.
I agree. I mean, one thing that's really kind of left me my heart a lot is guilt and shame. I really used to live in that space quite a bit.
Hmm.
And now that I chose not to live in the space of guilt and shame, but to know that God is crazy in love with me, uh, there's a lot more mercy towards other people. You see
Sure.
them in process. You see them on a journey. You see that this isn't the end yet. You know?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, shame serves only one purpose. It lets me know that I'm looking at it wrong. You know, and and so if I shame in some sense, I even see it as kind of irresponsible in that if I've done something that should not have been done, instead of taking responsibility for having done something I shouldn't have done, I'm actually trying to take responsibility for being a person who is wrong. And
Right.
that's not the problem. And you're really kind of avoiding the real problem. The problem is you should do that. And the answer to that is not, well, stop doing it, but the more you love someone, the more you realize how your behavior affects them, the more you're going to be honest about that. You find yourself so busy in love, you don't even think about it anymore. It isn't. It just isn't an issue, and yet we miss the mark.
Yeah, and I
And
know it's just like and I'm probably going on a little rabbit trail here, but the most biblically literate people in Jesus' day were the least loving. Now, does that
Right.
mean, right, that there's some kind of inverse relationship between Bible knowledge and not loving? No, it's just that you dupe yourself into thinking that your Bible knowledge is your relationship, and it's
And it
not.
is it's no substitute. Jesus even said, and you search the scriptures for them, you think you have life, but
But
these are
they're in
those
Him.
things that talk about me. And
Right.
yeah, and it's a shame. Now, I'll tell you, I still consider myself somewhat of a theologian.
Uh-huh.
I still consider myself a person who wants to be scholarly and honest. But I'll tell you, this is no substitute for just the plain reality of living loved, of knowing the presence of a loving Father who cares about you. And I find that as it goes on anymore, my main interest in studying theology is for the purposes of debunking bad theology. And that's it, I
Well,
don't
that's
really care
probably one of
about
the
much more.
reasons I read the Bible today is to, cut through the BS that I see or hear from people, you know. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I was unbearable, Bob, to be with 10 years ago. I mean, I'm just glad I'm still married, for crying out loud. But it's just when my understanding of God changed, it changed my whole perspective on people and relationships.
Yes, yes. I have a sister. I have five sisters. One is unfortunately no longer with us, but one of my older sisters even told me once that back when I was in the midst of my fundamentalist days, that when she saw me interacting with people, it just made her cry.
Mm.
She she saw something that just wasn't right, and yet what do you say?
Hmm.
And when I think back to some of the I suppose I suppose I meant well and I was enthusiastic, and in some ways I'm kind of
Sure.
learning from people teaching me, this is how you do it, this is what you do, and wanting to be a person who does it well. I think I did it well, and that's a bad thing. In fact, I would say that the odd thing about it is that having having been in that situation, that was a huge way of my own missing the mark. uh, anyway, I got a viewer comment. Someone
Okay.
says they've been there too, and they said that some of my own family have unfriended me. So there's a few viewers who have actually been commenting, and they can identify with your
Okay. That's
experiences.
happened to me too. Although I do have
Yeah.
one of my biological brothers, we're closer now that I'm not so quote unquote religious. But you're talking, Bob, about what you were doing, the witnessing, and how it affected your family. It's like when Jesus told the Pharisees, you go across the world to reach other people, and you make them twice the son of Hades as yourself. It's
Exactly.
the followers are always going to go more extreme, and I'm just glad I don't live in that space anymore, and I just can never go back.
Right. I have to, if I'm going to read that verse, I have to look in the mirror and
Ah,
be honest about it. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Well, Well, I'm glad other people can relate to what we've been going through. And here's the thing, though, it's for me is is being on this lonely path. It's as if God has taken me to the deep end of the pool of grace and thrown me in the deep end, and it's sink or swim. And I'm just thankful by His grace that I've been swimming.
yes, yes. Now I got another viewer comment that's actually coming through to me, saying, "Have we?" And they're actually talking about themselves, perhaps, become more worldly or more informed in regards to our thinking and understanding of Christianity and our judgment of others. I guess the question here has to do with uh, are we actually becoming more spiritual or becoming more worldly in our able to identify this detoxification process?
For
Are we
me,
more
I think we're becoming more normal. And that to me is a good thing. I think you used to say God is most glorified in us when we're most satisfied in Him. I think God's most glorified in us when we're most normal because that's what He created us to be. So, if I'm more normal, well, praise God for that. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, I would even go so far as to say I think that the rigid way of doing ministry, the authoritative, the text oriented,
uh-huh,
I think that is the way of the world, and I
very
don't
much so.
understand worldly to mean this attitude, but I think worldly means dealing with our faith as if what's here in the physical world is all we have. We can't touch Jesus, as it were, but we can touch the text. So making the text more important than Jesus is being
Mhm.
worldly.
Very much so.
Making Jesus more important than the text, and our relationship to him and our experience of his love more important than the text. That's
Yeah,
Christ centered.
yeah,
Anyway,
yep.
we've come to the end of this this
Oh,
hour, and I
just
am
got
just
warmed
so
up.
thankful. Wow. Yeah. But Dave, thank you so much for being my guest. I appreciate you, and I'm sure there are many people who've heard what you said can identify very much with this process. And anyway, let's see. If you were commenting, Dave, you have new friends in Texas and in Florida. So there's some people telling
Oh,
you that they love you. They think you're
thank
awesome.
you.
So
That's from
don't
our
don't be
NCG Texas studio, guys.
right.
Yeah.
The people there in the NGC Texas studio, yeah. So don't be surprised if you get a few friend requests from people who can just identify with and support you very strongly. Anyhow, that's all the time we have for this evening, and I'll be back next week with Dave Hayward. He's known as the Naked Pastor, and I promise you, it's going to be an awesome time with him too. But Dave Lilligren, thank you so much for being
Sure
my
thing, Bob.
guest. And
It's
we'll be talking to you
all right, buddy. It's
during the week.
been a delight.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm Bob Graves, and I have a show here at the place called The Unconventional Pastor, and I would love it if I could get your participation in the show with your questions and your comments by video. Your question or comment can be something about the Bible, theology, maybe something you saw on an earlier show, or something you read in my blog. Here's what I'd like you to do. Make a video in as high quality as you can of yourself asking the question or making the comment. After you've made your video, upload it to Facebook, YouTube, or someplace else where I can find it, and make it public or private. Then you can send me a private message in Facebook that includes a link to your video. In your message, make sure that you include your full name spelled correctly. I'm kind of excited about sharing as many of your questions and comments as I can possibly fit in the show. On behalf of the New Covenant Group, I'd like to thank you for your participation in making this show even better.